In July 1982, two boys cycle along Frager Road near Kent, Tacoma. Cycling faster as the light fades and the tree canopy casts long shadows, they cross the Peck Bridge. The bike wheels struggle for grip on the leaf-covered ground. One boy skids and falls. Laughing at the slippery conditions, his friend notices that rather than moaning or calling out, his friend is silent. There, in front of them, is a decomposing body of a young woman, Wendy Lee Coffield, aged 16. Here, in the Dark Lounge, we discuss what did happen. On August the 15th, 1982, while rafting down the Green River, a shocking sight greets the weary traveller that no one would want to see. 3 bodies floating. Deborah Lynn Bonner, aged 23, had been missing for a month. Marcia Faye Chapman, aged 31, last seen leaving her home on the 1st of August. Cynthia Jean Hines, aged just 17. All raped and strangled to death. Within 6 months, 3 more bodies would be found in the Green River. So began a murder investigation that would last 17 years, cost over $15 million, and involve seeking counsel from the notorious serial killer, Ted Bundy. In 1982, a truck painter called Gary Leon Ridgway was arrested on prostitution-related charges. A devout Baptist who frequently used prostitutes, Ridgway was released, but his details kept on record. In 1984, following further murders in the area, Ridgway was again brought in for questioning. The police administered a polygraph test that Ridgway passed, and therefore released again without charge. A later investigation found that due to police negligence, Ridgway had actually failed the lie detector test. Several years later, Ridgway was interviewed again, and the police took hair samples from him, but still failed to connect him to the serial murders. The murder scenes had been contaminated with so much false evidence, the crimes looked like they would never be solved. And by 1991, there was only one investigator left on the case. However, a decade later, a new tool was deployed that revitalised the investigation: DNA profiling. Born in Salt Lake City on February the 18th, 1949, Gary's childhood was not a stable nor a supportive environment. His parents would frequently fight, which led to violence, and the young Ridgway would hide and cover his ears until it was over. It was found that Ridgway continued to wet his bed until the age 13, and his mother would embarrass him by washing his genitals after every accident. Inside, the anger was building, with Ridgway confessing to having opposing feelings of hatred and sexual desire for his mother, culminating in a fantasy of murdering her. Ridgway's father, a bus driver, would complain of the city becoming overrun by prostitutes, instilling at an early age in the youngster that sex workers were sinful, subhuman, and human garbage. Identified mostly as sex workers or runaways, picked up around the Pacific Highway South, these vulnerable young women all had one thing in common. They were unprotected and easy to target. Many of the first victims were strangled while being violently raped from behind. The use of ligatures was then used to ease the process, as the victims would previously fight back, with the bodies ultimately being dumped into the Green River. As the police identified the hallmarks of a serial killer and started to look for the pattern, the Green River killer changed his modus operandi for disposing of the bodies. He would dump them in wooded and overgrown areas, sometimes in different states to confuse the investigation. In some cases, he would group the bodies as his confidence grew. With similarities to the Ted Bundy case, an FBI profiler interviewed Ted and was told by the deranged murderer that the killer was local, knew the victims, and would return post-mortem to have sex with the bodies. In 2001, 7 samples from the first 3 victims found in the Green River were sent for DNA retesting and came back with a match. On November the 30th, 2001, Gary Leon Ridgway was arrested leaving his workplace in Renton, King County, Washington. In court, Ridgway was put on trial for 7 murders, but controversially the district attorney agreed for Ridgway to avoid the death penalty for life in prison, if he confessed.
Gary Ridgway does not deserve our mercy. He does not deserve to live. The mercy provided by today's resolution is directed not at Ridgway, but towards the families who suffered so much.
Ridgway had killed these vulnerable women in his house, in his car, and left them decomposing in woodlands and abandoned areas. For the following days he had returned and had sex with the corpses, defending this as a way to lessen his need for new victims. He selected prostitutes as they would not be noticed missing for days, and used a picture of his son to calm the victims, to build their trust, to cover his deep-rooted hatred. On November the 5th, 2003, Ridgway entered a guilty plea to 48 charges of murder. This made him one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. Gary Ridgway is held in isolation at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla. He is serving 48 life sentences with no possibility of parole. Ridgway has confessed to murdering at least 71 victims. 71 victims. 71.
71 victims. 71. 71. 71. 71 victims. Victims.